Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Pittsburgh. I'm Stephanie Pulowski, commissioned lay minister with this church. It is not July 31st, that is what my notes say. It is August something, 7th? August 7th. With me today is our guest, Reverend Kristina Church. Reverend Kristina Church grew up all over the country in an Air Force family, spending many years in Anchorage, Alaska. She holds a Master of Social Work degree from Columbia University and a Master's in Divinity from Meadville Lombard Theological School. Her passions in ministry include environmental and racial justice, restorative practices, and spiritual development for all ages. Kristina lives in Western Pennsylvania with her husband, Greg, and 11-year-old son, Raphael, and serves as minister of the UU Congregation of Erie. Thank you so much for coming to join us today. We also have Kiki Barley with us this morning as our guest pianist because Ellen Goshen is off today. We are so glad that you have chosen to be with us this morning. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. Just as you are welcome. We are working for justice wherever the heavy weight of oppression has dug into the fabric of life. I am live in our sanctuary, along with some in person and those on YouTube. I have with me today volunteers and staff all working to bring this worship to you. On behalf of this team, thank you for being with us this morning. There's a hearty small bunch here in person today. If this is your first time with us, we would love to be in touch with you. If you have not already done so, please go to our welcome desk in the atrium, or if you're on YouTube, visit our website, just Google First Unitarian of Pittsburgh, and sign up for our weekly newsletter found at the bottom of the page. You're also invited to join us for social time on Zoom following this live worship. To get a Zoom link, please send an email to firstunitarianpittsburgh@gmail.com, and you will get a link by auto response. And if you are here in person, there will be a social hour in the garden after the service. Fewer people means more treats for those of us that are here. So please pick up some refreshments in the Schweitzer room and join us outside. I invite you now to take a deep breath. Arrive in body and spirit and picture yourself connected to all others who are watching today and in the future. We turn to our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. If you have a chalice at home, we invite you to light it at this time. In the words of Deborah Burrell, fire consumes and casts a bright light. May our chalice flame consume our regrets for the past, our fears about the future, and our worries about today. May it light for us a path of joy and peace. May this flame burn bright in your heart and mind as we worship together. Please now rise in body and spirit and join us in singing hymn number 389, Gathered Here. We are going to sing it as a round.
We will play it all together first, and then we'll split into two-part round. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered
Our story this morning is called The Grateful Yeti, a Himalayan folktale. A Tibetan Buddhist yogi wandered through the mountains. One day, he was crippled by an attack of gout and was unable to walk. He established himself in a pleasant place at the edge of the forest where he found some goats. The goats grew to trust him and eventually followed him everywhere like pets. There he remained on the edge of the forest. Meanwhile, on the other side of the hill were some abandoned shacks. Every day, the yogi watched as he saw a huge, dark man coming and going between the shacks and the river. The man was larger than a normal human, and like the yogi, appeared to be totally alone. Apart from this, he saw no other signs of life. One week, the yogi noticed that he didn't see a strange neighbor on his daily walk. Having become intrigued by that mysterious man and feeling a bit better, the yogi decided to investigate the man's dwellings. The yogi traveled to the other side of the hill to the abandoned shacks, taking along his goats for the walk. Inside one, the yogi was startled to come face to face with a wild man, or as Tibetans call the Yeti. The giant was lying outstretched on the floor, eyes closed, fangs apart, seemingly unaware of the intrusion into his dwelling place. He was feverish and obviously quite ill. One of the Yeti's feet was grossly swollen and full of pus. The yogi immediately noticed that protruding from the infected area of his vast foot was a sharp splinter of wood that could easily be removed, he thought. The yogi thought, I know he can jump up and devour me at any moment, but now that I have come this far, I might as well try to help the poor creature. So he gently extracted the long splinter. The Yeti, aware that the yogi was helping him, lay as still as he could, not making any movements at all. The kindly yogi then cautiously cleared away the pus. He washed the wound using his own saliva as a salve and bandaged the bizarre-looking foot with a rag torn from his own clothing. On tiptoe, he then left the Yeti, returning to his goats, which he had left tied to a tree in the forest. He walked the goats back home to his side of the hill. Days afterwards, the yogi saw the Yeti limping down to the river, presumably for water, and then slowly returning to his dwelling. Day after day, the creature's gait seemed to improve to the point where he could walk without any difficulty. Miraculously, as the Yeti improved, the yogi's crippling gout also began to subside, so that his painful stride began to return to normal until he too was completely cured. For a few days after that, the yogi again did not see the Yeti. And then one day, as the yogi was sitting on his edge of the forest, the ferocious Yeti suddenly leapt down from the trees, grimaced at the yogi, and sprang back into the trees and was gone. A few days later, the same thing happened, but this time, the Yeti was carrying a dead tiger on his shoulders. Placing the magnificent creature in front of the Lama as if in token of his gratitude, he again bounded off into the dense jungle. Please join me in singing hymn 1031 in your teal hymnal, May I Be Filled with Loving Kindness. Our religious community is made up of volunteers and staff, creating and hosting a variety of programming, even as we continue to stay safe during this time of pandemic. We rely on your financial support. Please take time to reflect on your ability to financially support this congregation. Donations by check may be mailed to the church office. Electronic donations can be made online through the church website or by texting GIVE to 412-435-1050 and following the instructions. We hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows. Joanne Wagstaff had a bad fall this week and severely injured her back. Please keep her in your thoughts and prayers. We remember those who are experiencing losses of various kinds and those facing health challenges. We are aware that many are faced with heightened difficulties presented by these times that continue to be challenging for us all. May we find joy in our connections with each other and in the pleasures that life holds. Let us continue to care for one another and for ourselves in all the ways we can. We hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows, whether spoken or unspoken. Let's take a moment to be quiet together. And in the words of Karen Johnston, who adapted the prayer of Shanti Diva from an 8th century Buddhist monk, may I be a guard for those who need protection. When I seek protection, may I find it and share it. For those who wish to cross to a further shore, may I be a boat, a raft, a bridge. May I be open to the companionship of others as I make my way to places still before me. May I be a lamp in the darkness for all who seek it. May that light never extinguish from my own sight and my own heart. May I be a resting place for the weary and be healing medicine for all who are sick. May I know the salve of others for my own affections, whether of the body or of the mind or of the heart. Where others see scarcity, may I see a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles. As part of the boundless multitudes of living beings, may I bring sustenance and awakening, freedom from sorrow. And may I delight in our common existence, holding most tenderly those with broken hearts. Let us sit together. And let's continue our meditation in song by singing Meditation on Breathing, hymn 1009 in the Teal hymnal. And this is sung in 3 parts. Please try out one of the other parts that you've not tried before.
We'll play it through, starting with the drone, then the melody, and then the descant. Ali and I will join it with us as Ali and I sing the melody, and then we'll split and sing whatever part you feel happy with.
Thank you all so much, and good morning once again. Thank you for having me here at the First Unitarian Church of Pittsburgh. I'm glad to be here with you all this morning, and glad that we can have this opportunity to worship together. It's been quite a summer so far. As I'm sure you know, we have had many, many crises of political nature, of climate nature, and maybe many of us are wondering what is coming in the future. We might be wondering how we can prepare ourselves for the times that are ahead in our own lives and in the life of our country and in the life of our planet. And whenever I find myself in this kind of state of worry and anxiety about the future, I always find that the messages of Buddhism offer me some strength, some calming, and some handles to grab onto. So that's what I wanted to share with you all today in an informal way, starting with the fundamental teaching of the 3 jewels. So when I start to talk about Buddhism, I like to share a little bit about the life of the person that it's named after, the Buddha, the awakened one, because I think his life has a resonance for a lot of us. And so I want to share Stephen Prothero's short account of the Buddha's early life from his book, God is Not One. He notes that Buddhism begins with a kind of a reverse fairy tale. It begins with a prince in a castle living this stunning, happily ever after life. And then that life starts to unravel a little bit. It's a story about someone who begins with everything and then decides to give it all away. The prince's name is Siddhartha Gautama, and the time is the 6th century BC, very long ago, known as the Axial Age, when many of the world's most prominent religions were founded and cemented their practice. The prince's mother had died as he was taking his first breath, so he knew suffering in his bones with the loss of his parent. But his father, perhaps to make up for it, his father, the king, sees that life in the palace is perfect for him and does everything he can to make Siddhartha's life a life of luxury and ease and beauty and happiness. Now, his father was religious, but he was a practical man too, and having been told that a prophecy that his son would either become a great warrior or a great religious man, he really wanted the first one to happen. So he did everything he could to prevent the prince from seeing any kind of suffering, any kind of difficulty or inequality or injustice. So the prince grew up in this perfect world of castles and gardens and luxury and servants without really experiencing anything of the suffering that was the human condition at that time, and that is still the human condition in our world. So the coddled prince enjoys this life of champagne and caviar, and like Muhammad and Confucius, he's lost a parent as a boy, but he still has this beautiful house, this beautiful wife, and a beautiful son. Everything seems fine, but these questions keep bubbling up. And he starts to ask himself, well, how did I get here to this beautiful place with this beautiful wife? And he looks at the roads that lead out from the palace, and he starts to get a little bit curious about those roads and imagine where they might lead. And this is where the awakening comes in. This future light of Asia informs his father that he wants to see the real world. His father says, well, all right, reluctantly agrees to let him tour the confines of, to tour outside the confines of his sheltered life, but he still orchestrates things very carefully, makes advanced plans so that the prince will only see the best of what's out there. Everything's been swept of homeless people, of unpleasant people who are ill or beggars. But on this tour, he does end up seeing a sick person, and he asks his charioteer, what is that? And the charioteer says, that is a sick person. Each of us will fall ill. You and I alike, no one is exempt from sickness. Now, on his second tour, he happens to see an old man, and he says, who is that? Because in his sheltered life, he thought he was shielded from old age. His charioteer tells him that is an old person, and we all will age and die, each of us, you and I alike. No one is exempt from death. Now, on his final tour, he sees a wandering holy man. Now, who is that? He asks the charioteer. And the charioteer says, this is a wandering ascetic who has left behind his spouse and his family and his job and his home in search of spiritual liberation. And this is when the Buddha decides that he's going to leave behind his power and his privilege and his pleasures and go out in search of spiritual riches. Now, when we talk about this story, it might resonate with some of us. Some of us who grew up with some form of privilege, some form of luxury, whether it's educational luxury, the luxury of being from a certain race that has privileges, or economic luxuries like Siddhartha enjoyed. But there comes a time in our lives where we wake up to the fact that there is injustice in the world, there's great inequality, there is great suffering, and that each of us is of a nature to suffer and to die, and that there is no escaping that fate. And so when we have that moment, it might be a moment or it might be a series of moments, we awaken. We awaken to the beauty and the terror of life. And believe it or not, the Buddha, the awakened one, says that this is the first jewel of Buddhism, a fundamental teaching that we can abide in. That when we awaken to this life of beauty and pain, that if we can stay with that feeling of being awake and aware of what life really is, that we can then become spiritually mature beings. So this is a moment of great opportunity in our lives. And so I want you to think about a moment in your life when you have awoken in some way, when you've realized the beauty and the terror of life, the wonder of life. What was it that brought about that awakening? Was it a piece of poetry, a work of art, a particular place that you visited? You see, Buddhists take refuge in the Buddha, the awakened one, in this process of awakening and in the belief that they can stay with this feeling of reverence, of beauty and awe and terror, and learn to live in it without running away, without shutting down, without numbing out to what is reality. And so, if you have a certain portal in your life that helps you to open out to that beauty and terror, I want you to remember that that is a place you can go, your source of truth, your way of waking up to reality. Maybe it's a teaching from a certain person. Maybe it's a book that you read. We need to continually revisit our sources of reality and continually stay awake in this beautiful and also suffering world, if we're going to be any good to ourselves or to one another. So awakening to reality, taking refuge in the Buddha, this awakening is the first jewel that we need on our journey through life. Now, what happens once we awaken? Do we just stay there forever? Buddhism says no. We're not able to do that. We're not capable as human beings of staying in that place of beauty and presence forever. Because we will construct ways to escape it. It's just too much. We can't keep our hearts open without help. Sooner or later, we will get drawn away into the details of life, into those patterns, those habits, into that dulling sense that life is a grind, and that what's really important is pleasure and privilege and power, rather than the spiritual jewels that the Buddha taught us about. And so that brings us to the next jewel. How do we maintain this awakened state? How do we find our way to holding our hearts open for longer and longer periods of time? And that is called Dharma. So we have Buddha, awakening to reality, and Dharma, which I'm calling focused activity. And Dharma is an interesting word. It's an interesting Sanskrit word because we don't really have an equivalent for it in English. It means teachings, but it also means right action. It means living into the teachings and the values that we hold most dear. So it's not just about going to lectures and going to and reading books. It's also about the practice of living those values and training for holding our hearts open in this broken world. And let's think about that for a minute, because that's a little bit of a stretch for us sometimes, right? But I want to think about any new endeavor that we start, right? Let's say we want to become a bodybuilder. We decide we're going to become a bodybuilder. Do we read a few books about bodybuilding, put them aside, and decide we've done our job? No, we need to train, right? We need to train our bodies. Or let's say we want to become a pastry chef. We don't just read a few recipe books and figure we know everything there is to know about making a cake, right? We have to do it a few times, and we actually have to try and perhaps do it badly sometimes. And this is how it is with Dharma, with the practice of holding our hearts open, the practice of presence and awareness. Now, traditional Buddhists would advise meditation as a practice, right? And we've heard a lot about meditation in recent years, about mindfulness and all that it can do for us. And maybe that sounds good to you. Maybe you have your own practice. Or maybe that sounds like not something that you are drawn to, and that's okay. But in this world of uncertainty and suffering, we can benefit a lot from having a practice that, as Unitarian Universalist writer Mike Hogue describes it as connecting to what is intimate and ultimate about our lives. So connecting to the present moment and to all that it holds, and keeping that awareness, keeping our hearts open to the beauty, the intimate and ultimate beauty of life. Now, when I work with Unitarian Universalists to find their own spiritual practices, they often think of it as spiritual broccoli, something that they don't want to do, but they have to do because it's going to be good for them. Sort of like brushing your teeth or eating your spinach. But in truth, if we find the right spiritual practice, it will bring us joy. And it won't be drudgery. Often the best spiritual practices come right out of what we're already doing in our lives. Like, I can think of a time when I was walking my young son to school every morning, and I was very, very busy. I was a seminary student. I didn't have time to come up with this new spiritual practice, but I realized I was walking in the outdoors every morning, Monday through Friday, a 5-minute walk there and a 5-minute walk back. And I realized that if I brought a little more intention and a little more attention to that daily ritual, that it could become a spiritual practice for me without devoting any more time or any more energy to a new practice that I was going to have to find time for in my life. Now, Reverend Eric Walker Wickstrom, a Unitarian Universalist minister, in his book Faithful Practices, he describes spiritual practice for UUs as anything that we do with intention, attention, and regularity that connects us to that intimate and ultimate experience of life. So with just a little bit more attention, a little bit more intention, I was able to find a way to make my daily walk a moment of gratitude for all that was in my world, the trees, the birds, the people that I would meet. If I could find 3 things to be grateful for each morning on my walk, it changed my whole day. Another spiritual practice that has been helpful for me is drinking my daily cup of tea and taking just a moment to say, this is the day that I have before me. I rejoice in it, and I'm grateful. It changes the way that I live the rest of my day. So finding a spiritual practice doesn't have to be onerous or annoying or take a lot of extra energy, but it can do wonderful things for us. It can keep our hearts open to life. It can steady us during times of crisis, our own crises or the crises of the world. If we have that little moment of peace and joy and awareness to hold on to, that little handle, we can get through whatever we need to get through. And so I want to invite you now to think about your day, to think about something you're already doing. Maybe you're walking a dog, maybe you're working in the garden, maybe you're going for a daily run. And I want you to think about a shift that you can make where you could just bring a little bit more intention and attention to that practice so that it can connect you to the larger universe, to the beauty that is our lives, and to the present moment, which is all that we have. Picture yourself going through that ritual and picture it being a comfort to you. Picture it calming and settling you. Picture it helping you make it through your daily round. And picture it opening you out to see the beings all around you and to recognize that they too are part of this wonderful life that we share. And that leads us to the third jewel. So we have Buddha awakening to truth and reality. We have Dharma continuing to learn and practice and grow and be in intentional practice with our spirit. And finally, we have the third jewel that Buddhists teach, which is the Sangha. And Sangha may be the least familiar word for us, another Sanskrit word, which just means community. And so here we all are in Sangha today, in a community of those who have come here to find what is intimate and ultimate. So let us take a moment to look around at one another and appreciate each other's presence here today. We can smile through our masks. I guess they call it smizing. You can smile with your eyes at one another and say, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for being my community this morning. For you see, even if we commit to a wonderful spiritual practice, even if we awaken to the world and train to hold our hearts open, eventually we will get busy with life, something will get in the way, or we'll have our own crises, and we will need others around us to hold us when we're struggling, to provide structure when we get bored or frustrated with our routine, or we feel like we're not making the progress we wanted to make, to call us to our best selves, to reflect back to us the beauty that they see in us, and also to challenge us to truly live out our values. Community is that place where we rub up against other people and we find out what our rough edges really are, right? It's all very well to sit in our room and light a candle and breathe and gaze at our navel and think that we're incredibly enlightened and compassionate. And then we get into community and we realize, oh, we still have some rough edges. There are still those people who get on our nerves or who don't bring out the best qualities in ourselves, or who tell us that we are doing something that they don't appreciate or that's harming them, and that's hard to hear. But again, Sangha, community, is that opportunity to continue to work out those rough edges of ours that we all have, to hold our hearts open, to be able to listen to the feedback of others, and then to work through that feedback to make some corrections, to change what we're doing so that we're more in accordance with our values. And this works out very, very well with Unitarian Universalist congregations and communities, which we say are covenantal communities. In fact, religious educator and UUA staff person Sue Phillips, who has served in so many different roles at the Unitarian Universalist Association and writes so beautifully of our faith tradition, she says that we really cannot be Unitarian Universalists in isolation because we are a covenantal faith, and covenant requires relationship to hold us in that container of relationship, of that interdependent web of the larger circle, and hold us to our covenant, our promises that we make to each other, and our aspirations to live into our values. So, if we can practice these three things, if we can remember those places that help us awaken to the truth of this world, awaken to reality, if we can find a way to grow and learn and practice with focused activity, and if we can find a loving and compassionate community to hold us in those practices, then I think we can be in good shape for whatever comes in our world. There are no promises. The unknown can be scary. We are all of a nature to grow old, to die, to suffer. But by holding and carrying the three jewels with us, we can lessen our own suffering, and then we can reach out to others in compassion to lessen their suffering as well. And so I have a blessing in three parts for you, and that's how I would like to end today. The first blessing I'd like to offer is the blessing of Buddha, or waking up to reality. May all of us awaken to the truth, to reality. And may we find the courage to stay there. May we be led to guides who will help us navigate reality without falling into despair. And may we learn to awaken again and again, as often as is necessary for us to know life as it is, rather than running away, numbing, or denying. May our hearts stay open. The second blessing, the blessing of Dharma, that I offer to you today, may our true path reveal itself, and may we have the courage to commit to journey on that path. May we show up again and again for practice, the activity of becoming skillful and prepared and strong enough for whatever life brings. And may we cultivate the wish to relieve our own and others' sufferings. And finally, the blessing of Sangha, community. May we seek and find that Sangha, that community that helps us to journey and learn and grow in relationship with others who are on a similar path. May they hold us up when we fail. May they hold us accountable when we fall out of covenant. And may they hold us always in unconditional love and compassion. And may we be blessed with the opportunity to do the same for the others that we find in our Sangha. Now, you need not be Buddhist or believe any particular system of theology, I believe, to find the three jewels a useful and helpful idea. So I hope something today has helped or sparked your interest or given you a new way of thinking about your life. And I hope that you can find a way to stay close to these three practices. Because when we stay with the three jewels, we can find what we need, no matter what comes. May it be so.
Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing hymn number 295, Sing Out Praises for the Journey. Please join me in reading the words printed in your order of service. the words spoken in UU churches around the country as we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
And today we will end with the words from the Buddhist metta meditation, of which our song, May You Be Well, is based. May all beings be well. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. Thank you.